5, 4. Whoa. What episode? 20?
20.
Yeah.
20.
5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, everybody, welcome back to We're Not Dead Yet, episode 20. I am your host, Curt Schilling. He's your co-host, Brian Youse. We are joined by the great Chris Withers and Joe Balkowski, the founding gentleman, one of the founding gentlemen of one of the greatest, I think, even though I haven't played limited, reputation-wise, best Civil War representations, war games of all time, great campaigns of the American Civil War, known to studs like us as GCACW. We're going to take care of some quick news up front, and then we're going to jump in with Joe and Chris and talk all things GCACW. What do we got, B?
We don't have a whole lot, including me not having the windows that I need to do this. All my windows went away.
This is the part where Garrick edits out our stupidity, so don't worry about it, guys.
Yeah. Somehow I thought I minimized. There we go. I'm back. Okay. Trivia question. Let's get it out of the way so we have plenty of time for Joe and Chris to talk and not be bothered until they spring a GCACW related trivia question on us. Last week we had 28 entrants. As you may recall, we had a massive hex and squad leader looking for a sniper check modifier. 28 entrants, 30 actually, 2 people were incorrect. It looks like maybe Joe dropped off.
Yep, no, we're good. He'll come back.
And out of the 28 entrants, Doug Fitch won. The answer, of course, was -6. It's -1 for each half squad equivalent. There were 2 full squads there, and there was a 9-2 leader. He gets to add his leadership DRM in. So it's a net -6, which means you knock down the sniper on an 8, you'd pin it on a 9, and we can go from there. The 2 people that missed had a very interesting interpretation of the people in the location counting. I actually had to go to Perry over the week and talk to him extensively. We feel that when it talks about location, it means the actual, like, first level, ground level, second level location.
Not the hex.
Where the units are, not the target location, which is the entire hex. Doug's the guy who won. Perry felt it was in the spirit of the rules and didn't think that it needed any clarification. I don't know. I'll probably bring it up at some point. Maybe I think if you said the target's location as opposed to the target location, it would be clearer. But apostrophe S is a pretty minimal errata change, so I don't think we're going to be doing that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget Winter Offensive. Last time I checked, Winter Offensive, the last weekend of January, the 28th through the February 1st, had 93 pre-registrants, and that was like 5 days ago. So it quite frankly could be well over 100 by now. Should be a good tournament, we hope, and
another Winter Offensive bonus pack. You guys are finishing those playtests up.
Another Winter Offensive bonus
pack. Have, if I'm not mistaken, don't hold me to this, we could have 2, possibly 3 new Hall of Fame entries this year, and the scope of our Hall of Fame is now going to broaden out into things other than founders and the John Hills of the world. Starting to recognize some names that can ASL. I always look at the Sports Hall of Fames as if you're in the Hall of Fame, if the sports history or the project's history can't be talked about without your name, then you're in the Hall of Fame. And I think the men that have been nominated or being voted on now are all like very much like that. But we had mentioned that and we're going to wait. We've got the great Chris Withers. Joe has popped off. He'll be back on in just a minute, and we'll just drop him in seamlessly when he gets in. Garrick, do your editing best. But first off, Chris, thank you for the time is a big deal, and we sincerely appreciate it. So I'm going to start, Chris. Well, first question is talk about your history in gaming. Your likes, your loves, your dislikes, and the things, and how you came to be such an integral part of the GCACW series.
I grew up in Northern Virginia, and so as a kid, I was in all these stomping grounds of the games, all the Virginia games that we're designing. Right now, we're designing Stonewall in the Valley and Sheridan in the Valley. And as a kid, I remember rafting down the Shenandoah and camping on the Shenandoah River, trout fishing and whatnot, and bears were going through our campsite at night. And now I'm designing games on those areas. So it's come full circle for me. So as a kid, I played all the old Avalon Hill games, Gettysburg and Stalingrad and whatnot. And went off to college and gave up gaming for a while, and then wanted to pick up gaming again, and later in life, and saw great campaigns that pretty much just come out, had a couple titles, and saw it was really popular, so I started playing it and loved it so much that started going to the tournaments and started wanting to do designs, and Beach had picked up doing designs, and I think Joe, well, he can speak for himself, but I think was pulled out of the design for a while doing his real regular work. So I started doing game designs and kept it up over the years and did a few titles. And now Joe's back, which is great because I love working with Joe. We have pretty much the same gaming philosophy, one of which philosophies is the whole KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. So that's good.
Hey, Chris,
yes.
has the Civil War era always been your era, or are you just a military junkie in general?
Military in general. And but I've only done designs for the Civil War. I was heavily into World War II as a teen, reading all the books and
Right.
playing the games. But now it's pretty much.
Give me some names, other games you played, loved, and had fun with.
I liked Stalingrad, even though it's real simple. Third Reich as a kid. Now I like Twilight Struggle. I actually won the WBC once in Twilight Struggle. I liked For the People, which is a great strategic level Civil War game. I don't play a lot of different games, because I get overwhelmed by the rules, which really keeps me focused on our rules. We want to keep the page count down. We don't want to, when someone picks up a scenario, we don't, as much as possible, when it has to be realistic, but historical, but we don't want someone to get overwhelmed with just massive quantities of rules and just look at it and go, forget it, I'm not playing that.
Right.
So,
and I would go ahead, Brian. Go ahead. Sorry.
So GCACW seems to be suffering a little bit from rules bloat. I mean, you guys are, I say that as an ASL player. You guys are the only ones that we do the flat binded printing of rule books for, because we can no longer just fold the pages in half and call it a rule book. Do you think that, you said you wanted to keep it simple, is it going to kind of regress to an easier system as Joe's on board, or is the page count strictly driven by the content? I mean, the number of scenarios and things like that?
well, there's the standard rules that people are probably familiar with, where it's the same rule system of how you move and how you attack and all whatnot for every game in the series, and that's a 24-page set of rules, and that's not going to change. We've got that as sure as we can, and we can't drop rules out at this point. We don't add rules in, and they don't really change. They get clarified from one game to the next, but they're already pretty clear. For each individual game that comes out, it has its own booklet. Yes, it's a rule book, but it's mostly scenarios for the basic game scenarios, which just use the standard rules, and each scenario has its own setup and a few special rules. The advanced games, which cover the campaigns in each game, like Gettysburg or Antietam and whatever, those have their own special set of rules, which are maybe a dozen pages per or maybe less for each campaign, and those cover the different supply issues and reinforcement tables and whatnot for each game in each new campaign. So the booklets for each new module can get kind of thick because there's so many scenarios. And then again, there's those advanced rules.
So, Chris, let me ask you something we've been dealing with, and I'm sure it's been, and Joe is going to be someone I'm going to want to hear about this from as well. We're getting older. Our hobby's getting older. Technology is getting pretty invasive when it comes to board gaming, but I think I saw WBC board gaming is still alive and well. Joe, you can chime in here if you want, because I do want to hear what you think. Introductory level GCACW or something to that effect. Is that a possibility? Because, I have a couple friends who are teachers, and they've gladly taken starter kit into the classroom. But I think World War II history in a high school history setting is much more ambiguous than the American Civil War. And I would love to see something beyond a mini-driven, fundamental, one for all for one system, something that kind of steered you towards GCACW as an end game, as an end product. Is that even on the radar? Or is that a possibility?
Well, I'm getting severe echoing. I'm on my cell phone right now. So can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we hear
Yeah,
you
you're
fine.
good, Joe.
I mean, we tried the introductory route. I mean, as much as we could with the game Hood Strikes North. Forgive me, I missed the beginning of this because I couldn't.
No worries. Don't worry about it. We'll get you back in.
The game Hood Strikes North, we worked specifically knowing we wanted to have a one map game with very low counter density, but it uses the exact same standard rules. But Chris and I made a major effort to try to keep it as simple as possible. And supply rules in that game are non-existent. And often in some of the more complex GCACW games, like Atlanta is Ours, supply is a major, major headache. But it adds to the realism. It's possible that we could work on a super simplistic GCACW of a very, very small campaign. Uh, you know, even cutting the standard rules as they exist now in half. Getting rid of things such as bridging and rain and elements that
Right.
take up 20-30% of the standard rules booklet. That's something that is certainly feasible. We'd have to pick. We're almost running out of the major campaigns right now, but it would have to be a lesser known campaign.
Joe, I find one of the challenges as we at MMP look for some introductory level game. I mean, advanced squad leader is advanced squad leader. That's at the other end of the rainbow, right? I mean, we're not bringing people into the hobby with ASL. Starter kit, much more so. But I find that the challenge is when you're trying to, and I use this term, but you know what I mean, dumb down, simplify everything. I find my personal preferences interfering with that, right? I mean, ideally would be great. I mean, minis are a big thing now, right? Miniatures, the bolt action, and all the stuff to go with, and the Civil War and Napoleonic era probably are the prettiest mini-driven games out there because of the uniforms and the colors and stuff like that. Which I would argue to us four aren't really meaningful, but to getting a 14-year-old freshman in high school interested in the Civil War, maybe you want to do the things you talked about, which is get rid of bridging, get rid of move and shoot, simplify, but keep the historical piece and the historical component involved as something that can grow and expand as you get there. Obviously, for me, thinking for you two, the end goal would be to get them into want to play GCACW.
Yeah.
And that's really the question. How do you do that? How do you do that in a way that's, because I would argue, I'm going to speak for all four of us, and I could be wrong. We'll set, day one of ASL, we'll set up a Red Barricades 30-day campaign game, or The Last Bid, or Hill 621, and the Civil War guys. I've seen you guys at Winter Offensive. It's a 7-mapper with 19 players, and monstrous stuff. And to get the younger players in, you're talking about, let's do part of a map with maybe 8 to 10 to 12 units per side. Kind of hard to do that in Civil War. I get that. But yeah, I asked that question because I find very intelligent people like yourselves. I like to make you think about things that I'm curious about when you're not being asked the questions. So I know at some point you go off, and Chris might jot some notes down for a potential introductory GCACW sort of game. But that's because we all want the same thing, right? We all want the hobby to get younger. We want it to grow. I don't know. We're done with the days of 100,000 print run Avalon Hill productions, but that doesn't mean we can't continue, because I will mention one other thing, and we talked about this with ASL, and I would argue it's probably even more so important for you guys. I think we have an enormous responsibility to respect and teach the history involved in the things that we're portraying. We're portraying mankind's worst side, right? Which is warfare. And you want to do so, in my mind, with an eye towards educating the player. So when they're done playing something, they've learned how to play a game, but they've also learned something that's absolutely paramount to the history of this country.
It's an interesting point you make about simplifying it. We simplified, kept Hood Strikes North simple, like Joe said. It was the same basic rule system. So I hadn't really thought about it before, but it's a good idea to come up with a simplified rule structure to get entry-level players into it. I think we can do that because we're both proponents of the KISS systems.
Right.
It's always, when we're designing a game, coming up with special rules for scenario, it's always a good thought to don't think of reasons to put a rule in. Think of reasons
Right.
to keep a rule out.
Well, it goes back to chess, right? We all aspire to have chess as our end product. Simple to learn, difficult to master, right? And our games are difficult to learn and impossible to master, which we're okay with, but that's not, I don't think that's the target audience we'd like to quote unquote grow the hobby with. So I apologize for being long-winded there, but I really am curious to hear your thoughts. So and I am long-winded. I'm gonna back out here. I'm gonna leave you guys with one question. You can answer when or how. If I don't know, if I'm a wargamer, what and why is GCACW, because I believe it is, the title and the series to pick up if I want to learn and play the American Civil War and in a system that is representative of the action.
Which game in the series do you mean?
No. The series itself, because we're all the same, right? We never go out. Well, that I know of, you never go out and buy one thing. You see GCACW with the 4 modules sitting on the shelf, and your first thought is, I'm going to buy this one, but when can I get the other 3, and why should I get the other 3? And GCACW is linked, and it's potentially massive, which to me means fun. And I'm curious to know what would be your priority from a selling points perspective. Why the GCACW system?
Well, that's a great question because it goes back to the origin of the whole game design. You know, I've been a military history nut since I was a kid. I was a small kid during the American Civil War centennial, and as Chris said, grew up playing Avalon Hill. Got very lucky to get a job a couple of days after college graduation at SPI. Worked there for 6 years. You know, so military history has been a part of my blood for my whole memory, frankly. And part of it, gaming is learning history, and that has always been my priority. I never ever played games competitively. I always played them for the history lesson and the ability to pick up doctrinal lessons of what made some generals better than other generals. And part of my military history instruction was, I'm sure you guys have done this too. You've probably read the great Karl von Clausewitz on war. Had to read that in my graduate program. It's very dense and not very enjoyable to read, but it has some gold nuggets in there that really are the reason why this series began. You know, when you think of Karl von Clausewitz, one word pops out to you, and that is the word friction. You know, all military operations are defined by friction. Anything you plan to do never happens the way you want it to happen. And he had the very famous saying, he said, in war, even the simplest things are difficult. And I've been designing games since 1975, and I never was happy with the overarching vision of everything that happens on a game map. Now, of course, if you're playing it with another player and, you having the fog of war introduces a whole complex element of the game that I didn't want to get into in this series. But above all, I wanted friction to be introduced. You know, when you order somebody to make a move from one town to another, is it going to happen? It might happen. It might happen in parts. The enemy may interrupt that movement, and something unexpected is going to get in the way. And really, if you want GCACW to be boiled down to its simplest terms, it is friction. Nothing that you plan can really come to 100% fruition. And and that's probably what keeps people interested. I don't play competitively. And ironically, Curt, the original 3 games in this series were designed before there was any competition in this series. And if you're really kind of looking for how the game got more complex, you look at what had to happen when people fell in love with the series, and they had to very meticulously define every action in the game. So in a tournament, it was completely covered. And to me, that was not for me. That was more for people like Ed and Chris. I was much more into the history lesson and making damn sure that everything was accurate. And I'll leave it for Chris to comment on that.
I was just going to say that you talked about it, the word the player, the omnipotence of the player is something every game designer struggles with, in the sense that that fog of war thing is so hard to replicate in board gaming. We see it with Solitaire ASL in trying to make it, but any system that can, and you know, it's funny because we as players, we demand accuracy and we want fog of war. At the same time, we want full control of our units, because the best players in ASL hate the sniper rule, right? Because it's a random event that can occur and screw up everybody's plans. And in board gaming, that's, you know, that is a very hard thing to represent. And like you said, right, you want this battalion to go from, you know, Gettysburg to Vicksburg, and I can just move the pieces there. Well, you need a system that's not going to allow that to just happen, right? Because the Civil War is all about fire and maneuver, period. And it's before, obviously, mechanization and stuff like that. So yeah, the omnipotence part of it is I think our bugaboo, and the thing we always try, and you don't want to put rules in, right, Chris? You don't want to have a booklet full of rules that take the omnipotence part and rearrange it so it is less all knowing and all seeing, but you still want the game to be fun and enjoyable, and that's hard to do.
I would say also picking up on why pick up great campaigns for a Civil War game, or even a game in general. It kind of goes back to some of the same reasons I picked it up some 30 years ago or so, I guess. Number one, there's quite a number of players that play it. So you want you want to be able to find opponents, because your neighbor probably doesn't play it, right? But maybe a few people in the city play it, so you can get together in a gaming group. Huge online community that plays it on Vassal. On Facebook, there's a Facebook group that there's quite a lot of activity on, so it's easy to find players, for one thing. Another thing, there's quite a number of games with each has tons of scenarios. There's one on Gettysburg, Antietam, the Stonewall in the Valley, Vicksburg, and so on. There's some 13 or so titles, so there's a number of games to play. And lastly, going along with what Joe's saying and what you were saying, Curt, Great Campaigns introduces the basic rule structure, really introduces chaos of war really well into the system. One of the main reasons is, and there's a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is it's not like I go, it's my turn, and then it's your turn, then it's my turn, it's your turn. It's not I go, you go. You roll it's variable who goes. So you never know, based on a die roll, you never know if you're going to get that next move. You might get a few moves in a row, or you might move up. Do you want to attack now? It's kind of a poor, it's kind of just an okay attack, because maybe you should attack now because you don't know if you're going to get the move again. If the other guy going to get the move and completely blow your attack apart, or will you get a few moves in a row and really get to flank them? So it introduces this great chaos and unknown into the game, which also has the effect of making each time you play a scenario can be completely different due to the variability that it introduces. And there's other things that introduce chaos and variability too. Like in the campaign games, you never know if the day is going to end on you. It probably won't, but you never know. Just like your sniper in ASL, you never know when something is going to happen that will disrupt your plans. So you have to plan around that.
I'm not much of an ACW guy. I'm sorry. I'm not much of an ACW guy, but isn't Stonewall famous for like bluffing and moving his troops all the way through the valley and showing up at some battle in the nick of time and being the turning force? I mean, I don't recall the battle that happens. How do you simulate that in GCACW?
See, Brian, you touched on the very next point that I was going to bring up, but which is upon the origin of this series, there really was no war game out there on the American Civil War that was really operational in scope. We had tons and tons of battle games, a terrible Swiss sword system, and all of the follow-ons that inspired. And we also had a pretty decent gamut of grand strategic Civil War games. But there was nothing, in my view, that was even close to satisfactory showing the operational nature of the war. That is, not having a hex that's 100 yards, but having it be 2,000 yards. You know, a scale where you can have maneuver prior to battle be the key to the game. And again, forgive me for bringing up Clausewitz, but I recall another thing he wrote in his book. Another pivotal sentence he said was, the entire purpose of clothing feeding, and equipping a soldier is so that he can march through the countryside to a position of advantage on a place that will become a battlefield. And to me, that was that was a foundational principle of GCACW. The genius of people, as you mentioned, Brian Jackson, wasn't so much on the battlefield. It was on the maneuvering in the days prior to the battle. And in the case you bring up, the Shenandoah Valley, which is, interestingly enough, what Chris and I are working on right now, Jackson achieved things in 1862 in the Valley that, stand today as almost unbelievable operational military achievements. And to replicate that in a game, very, very difficult. But I think we've done a good job. And of course, that's going to be the next game to be released in the series. Jackson, a reprint of the 62 Stonewall in the Valley game, and a new game on Sheridan in the Valley for 64. But, if you play Stonewall Jackson in 1862 in the Valley, and you compare him to the ability of his Union opponents, it's really, some people don't like that as gamers, that Jackson appears to be a Superman, and oftentimes the complaints you hear on the chat boards is Jackson as a Superman. I think that's unrealistic, but when you really meticulously study the operational nature of that campaign, Jackson just, ran circles around his opponents with vastly inferior numbers of men. So anyway, great point that you brought up, and that is really the second reason why I got to design GCACW, to bring the operational level of warfare into the Civil War, because I think that's the key to the whole conflict.
For the record, that was blind luck on my behalf. It's not like I'm feeding Joe and Chris questions that we've pre-planned. Great minds think alike, maybe, I guess.
Right.
But
Lord,
that was actually the big... Well, sorry, Curt, what was that?
nothing.
He keeps saying Clausewitz, and I'm keep reminded of the fact that I'm in the Hall of Fame and you're not. Excuse me.
Oh,
Anyways, Grant will fluff that up, I'm sure. So the next game is In the Valley. We'll call it In the Valley. So it's going to be Stonewall in the Valley and Sheridan in the Valley, and that's what you're currently working on now. How do you guys divide up the labor on a joint game like this, or is this not a joint game and I'm overstepping? I should have checked first.
Well, I guess it's spontaneous. I'll pass it on to Chris in a minute. But generally in the past, I did the maps because, going back to the original game, Stonewall Jackson's Way, the map was, one of the pillars of the game. I would not have been capable of doing the game unless I had access to Civil War period maps that accurately depicted the theater of war. In the case of Stonewall Jackson's Way, it was amazing how many of these maps of Virginia counties were out there that gave the incredibly accurate road network, who owned the building.
let me just step in here real quick. I as someone who laid out a GCACW map for product, I'm blown away by the maps, Joe. Because I mean, there are, in my opinion, far more detailed maps than some of the stuff we get for the Second World War. And that's mind-boggling to me when you think about technology and where it's come. But the maps have always been a staple of the GCACW series. And as a guy who likes to open the box and look at new stuff, the maps in GCACW are one of the pieces when you see them spread out. Like I said, at Winter Offensive, you guys have 5 or 6 tables long of maps that join together perfectly and are aesthetically gorgeous.
Well,
Tried to get Charlie Kibler to come on, and he refused to. He didn't really refuse. He just said nobody wanted to hear him talk. But they're beautiful
Was that
maps.
Charlie?
I mean,
Well,
they really are
we
some of
can
the
show.
best.
We're going to show one of the maps he's working on now. They want to bring it up. It's the Frankfurt thing. It shows the Frankfurt, Kentucky. But go ahead. So that'll show people what we're talking about.
All right,
It's a
Garrett,
blow
it's a
up of
good
it.
time to throw that map in, and people can see. They are beautiful. They're just gorgeous maps.
And this is a zoom in of the map. It's a small piece
Well,
of it.
we have to combine, well, we don't have to, but we aspire to combine beauty with functionality, right? I mean, you're talking about these GCACW maps combined are massive. They represent large portions of this country. And They're incredibly functional inside the gameplay, and they're gorgeous to boot.
Yeah, it's several dozen gamers have told me that they buy the game simply for the maps. I'm not even sure they play the game. They studying
God
the
bless them.
map is a really fun and informative way of reading a book on the Civil War and then following it on a GCACW map. And I myself have done that. And, I want you to know that Charlie's been with me since day one. I mean, I started this design in 1991 when I had been an employee with him for many years, but I was a freelancer by that time. But in 91, he and I worked together on the original Stonewall Jackson's Way map, and he literally used a big easel with a brush and watercolors to paint that map. I mean, can you believe that?
No,
He
not in
used
this
that
day and age.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling how he did that. And now, of course, he's a master of making them up with computer graphics. I don't know how he does it, but he replicates the watercolor art of 1991 almost perfectly. And, and I will
Well, he
add,
certainly.
there were 2 games that were not done by Charlie, and people complained so much that we now have them remade. We have nothing now in the series that was not done by Charlie. So forgive the interruption.
Wargamers complain. Wow, that's such an odd thing to hear.
Only because I
but,
hope Charlie's listening. He certainly bills us like a master.
yes.
That'll give him something to email
And
me and
part
yell
of
at me about.
I've found with it, I'm wondering if this is the same with GCACW. I've come to learn over the last couple of years playtesting that the better players look at maps differently than the lesser players. I see +3 tem and movement factors. They can look at a map from a strategic perspective and understand my forces start here, I need to get here, and I want to do this in between. And the map is functional in the sense that you can look at it and do those things when you're someone who grasps the rules as well as a good player does.
Well, Chris could talk on that because he's the master player in the country, probably. But the function of the map is that it makes the game variable. Everything in the game depends on roads, and roads are not ever present. There are areas of the country where you're not going to have many roads, and you have to be limited to a road network. But Chris can talk about looking at the map and discovering expert ways of playing the game. I'm not so good at that.
Hey, Chris, behind
Somehow,
your right shoulder
yeah, you can
on the
see all
wall
the.
there, those
There's
are
all the plaques.
all your GCACW plaques
Yeah,
from
I think there's
WBC.
one Twilight Struggle in there, but
Snuck it in, but the rest
I
of
don't know.
those.
Somehow I see the system well. But chess, I'm an awful player. It's just bizarre. My chess strategy is play fast because maybe I'll make the other player nervous because I'm not going to get any better at thinking at it. But great campaigns. Somehow I see it. So speaking of maps, we pulled that map of Kentucky back up on mine, and so we're actually working on 2 games at once. Where the Stonewall, the Valley game is next, and we're playtesting it. We're designing the Sheridan scenarios now and playtesting them. But the Kentucky game and the 1862 Kentucky game, where the Confederates invaded Kentucky, we're working on the maps for those, and we've been working on them for over a year. And Charlie's work capturing now the maps that we created. It's 3 maps. This time I did them. I can't remember why instead of Joe, but it's staggering how much work it is. Just staggering. I worked on them for at least half a year, 20, 30, 40 hours a week doing those maps. And then Ed and Joe also did a bunch of work on them. But anyway, this map that you're probably seeing, so it's just a blow up of it. Each hex, remember, is about a little over a mile across. So it shows Frankfort, Kentucky, shows the Kentucky River, and there's a new terrain feature in the Kentucky game. It's called Palisades. So we could show the Palisades picture next. The Palisades are on some of the rivers in Kentucky. I think that it's limestone that got easily eroded away to cliffs. So Amelia, you can see from that Palisade picture, there is no way that a large military organization in the 1800s could get across that, could quickly bridge across and get across that. So they're a major barrier in the game. And like what you were talking about, I think it was Kerr or Brian, players, it's going to channel movement, so you can't cross this. So you can see the interesting thing back on that Frankfurt map of the terrain around Frankfurt, showing the Palisade. It's really interesting. There's a covered bridge there. We used historical period county maps, and it showed a covered bridge there. So that's a nice feature to put in. Don't just show the bridge. Say that it's a covered bridge. So we're working on both now. It's keeping us quite busy, both the Kentucky game and the Valley game.
Is there a working title for the Kentucky game? I can't recall.
There is. It's Battle of the Bluegrass, something like that.
Battle for the Bluegrass.
Battle for the Bluegrass. Yeah. Actually, I was showing the last Winter Offensive. I think I gave a presentation showing a lot of the work on the Kentucky maps, and we had a few titles that we had come up with, I think 5 or so, and I put them out to the Great Campaigns group there at Winter Offensive a year ago, and they voted on them, and Battle for the Bluegrass overwhelmingly won the vote.
That's a good title.
So players.
I don't recall any other game title with Bluegrass in it, but I could be wrong. There's a billion games now.
And another thing about the maps, Ryan and Curt, is that every map is different, and I don't just mean in appearance; I mean in geology. And you have to have a working knowledge of geology and geography to make these maps. You can't have rivers flowing uphill. The river network has to be exactly as nature has it. And every area of the Civil War had some unique feature of geology. For example, the Thunder on the Mississippi game had this new type of terrain. I literally have never laid eyes on it myself, but it was unique to that area of western Mississippi called Youse. It's a limestone terrain that's very, very susceptible to water erosion. Dominating feature of any action within 20 miles of or 25 miles of Vicksburg. And it supposedly has to be seen to be believed. And we had to work that into the game. And in fact, the best book that Chris and I used for the Vicksburg game was actually written by a geologist. It was called 98 Days, and he really worked the geology into how it influenced the campaign. And the similar in Kentucky, very unique terrain. It's an area of caverns, underground waterways. We actually have streams, creeks in that game that disappear because they go underground and then reappear again. So, it's more than the knowledge of history. You have to have a decent knowledge of cartography, of geology, and geography. So I always like those subjects. So I always enjoy making maps.
It's really interesting working with Charlie on this, on the Kentucky maps. He's, asking me questions. There's one interesting question was he was going with these streams that they're on the edge of the map. They weren't going into rivers because the streams are just at the edge. And so they're going on and off the map. He's going, what direction do they flow? And I'm going, huh? And so he puts brushstrokes or something in to show the direction of the water flow. So he had to ask me on these streams that he couldn't tell because they were so much at the edge, which direction do they flow? So the accuracy that he puts into it is amazing.
Well,
and then in the valley.
No, go ahead. Sorry, go.
In the valley maps that he, Joe could probably speak to this better. The mountains that are in it, he puts such detail. I think what he said he did. He took aerial views or something of the mountains, and the way they appear on the maps is the way that they're not just haphazard, just beautifully painted mountain structures. They are the way those mountains actually appear. So he really goes into great detail. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say real quick that's been a theme here since we started this podcast, and something that's been important to us and with the people we work with is attention to detail. It's an insignificant thing, the direction the stream flows, but accuracy and historical accuracy and detail has always been a big deal for us, especially coming from the ASL world. Those are the little things to me that matter. It has no impact whatsoever on gameplay. But those are the little details that when your players know that you care that much about it, then they don't question other things that you do. They almost force people to look into the topic. Why is this? And they'll go and search out an answer and find out, well, it's that way because that's the way it was, but they've represented that and they didn't have to.
Yeah, that's I've said this before on the podcast. I used to be a competitive player at ASL, and a couple of other games. But I mostly play games now to give me a reason to go buy books on subjects and battles that I've never looked into, which is why I'm reluctant to dip my toe into the Civil War, because not only buying books, I could do that, but I could also jump in my truck and drive and get, almost all the major battles within 3 hours of Baltimore. I mean, it's kind of silly. For me, they're a gateway into the history. So I love the attention to detail. But I still think, as a game manufacturer, that a starter game, introducing GCACW to people would be an awesome way to go. And Joe, you had said earlier that it would have to be a lesser known battle or something. Why do you think that? Why couldn't we just do Antietam with simpler rules that
Or
maybe
Gettysburg.
funnel somebody into buying the Antietam game? And I apologize, I don't remember which one that is, but
Well,
Here
that's a
come the
good
rebels.
point. You just would have to limit the area so that those functions of the current GCACW that involve complexity, such as bridge building and well, I hate to say this, but the flanking rules are the one thing that people complain about. But, again, I reiterate, they were thrown in the game because they had to, they were mandatory when people were playing competitively because it completely codifies everything perfectly. But you're right, Brian. I mean, we probably could have an introductory game, a smaller version of a major campaign like Antietam or Gettysburg that even simplified the things like flanking and at least cut the rules, which are currently 24 pages, to 12, maybe even 8. I mean, I remember I did that at SPI back in the late 70s when I took the game Wellington's Victory, which was a very complex.
Great game.
It is a great game. And I took the basic system and I reduced it to 8 pages of rules for the Battle of Quatre Bras, which preceded Waterloo by 2 days. And I really simplified everything. So it can be done. But, Chris and I will look into that.
I feel like I
Attaboy.
just created thousands of GCACW fans lighting torches and grabbing pitchforks to storm my house for slowing down more modules to GCACW while you guys look at an introductory game. But maybe it's necessary. But maybe that's something we really should think about. We can, or either of you guys coming to Winter Offensive. I know Chris comes on occasion, right?
I've been there the last few years, but I can't make it this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
No, that's
I can't
unfortunate.
make it either. I think Ed is going, though.
All right, well, really, because last I saw Ed, he had kind of bowed out of most of it. That was last year at WBC. We had a 10 or 15-minute hallway discussion, and
Okay.
he was just so busy with life and work and his games. I mean, Virgin Queen or something. I guess I can say that on a public broadcast. That he had basically said he was turning the reins over to you two, and it was all good. I hope I'm not misrepresenting that, because oddly enough, I'm going to tell a real quick story. Sorry to bore everybody. Ed Beach was my boss coming out of college. I worked at NASA for a contractor, and he was in charge of the project that I worked on. And he had a corner office in our high-rise building and this massive meeting table. It was huge, could probably hold 15 people, I bet. And we would set up war games at lunchtime, and then it got to where he would just leave them there and have meetings around the war games. It was hilarious. We did that for years. And we took a guy, I can't even remember his name now, and we were playing History of the World because that was easy enough. We could rope some people into playing. We played so often and so cutthroat. I mean, you guys know Ed. History of the World's the worst game to play with Ed. You might as well play Seven Wonders. The last turn, he min-maxes his points. It's insane. And we took this guy and we played so much, so hardcore, so cutthroat that he went into like the 140-person WBC tournament, won the first time he ever went to a tournament, and then was like, why would I ever go back? I won. He had to come back, and he never played again. So it was bizarre. But yeah, there you go. Little small world scenario. I knew Ed long before I ever even heard of GCACW. And then we bumped into each other again, and he's, of course, a pleasure to work with and responsible for a lot with GCACW. So, I don't want to leave him out of the conversation at all, for sure. Anyways, look at that. I lost track of what I was talking about. Introductory kit. Okay, cool. If I could deviate just 1 second, I wanted to ask, a lot of people might not know, Joe, that you're heavily involved as a historian in World War II for the 29th Infantry Division. Of course, you wrote that fantastic series of books. I think I only have 3 or 4 complete sets of them. But I just was reading about you, I threw your name into ChatGPT and I sent you the crazy list of what it thinks you worked on. And it talked about a museum in Baltimore I have never heard of, despite living 20 minutes south of Baltimore. That's absolutely one of them. Joe is, they're fantastic books. But this museum, it's all about Maryland military history, or can you say anything about the museum? Or, I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't work with them anymore.
I retired from it, but I basically created it. While I was designing these games, I was actually employed, both full and part-time, over really a 30-year period. I was employed by the Maryland National Guard as a historian, which de facto meant that I became the historian for the current 29th Infantry Division, which, as you know, still exists, and landed in the first wave on Omaha Beach. So that connection, ironically, here we are talking about the Civil War, but realistically, my primary interest in military history is World War II, in particular, the U.S. Army and the European theater. I mean, I've devoted much of my adult life to that subject. And anyway, I had an office in the 5th Regiment Armory for decades. They had fantastically valuable artifacts lying around in footlockers and in closets. And over a period of 15 years, I slowly built that collection up into a museum, and it now is called the Maryland Museum of Military History. It's a museum of like 8 or 9 separate rooms. Each room is dedicated to a period of Maryland history, but some of the objects in the Maryland National Guard collection are just fantastically interesting. We have one of the first Jeeps that ever came ashore on Omaha Beach that happened to be the command Jeep of the 29th Infantry Division commanding general, and I took care of that Jeep for 30 years, and I love it like a child. Anyway, way more than that. But honestly, I retired 4 years ago, so I'm not in touch with really what's happened. I do know that COVID threw the whole organization into chaos. And I'm not entirely sure whether the museum is open to the public anymore. I would expect that if you call for an appointment, you could get in. But when I was there, people just walked in off the street, and it was a very wonderful experience. And I was a very, very lucky man. I got into the subject when the veterans of Normandy were still relatively young. I mean, I remember going to a 29th Division reunion, and I met people in their late 50s. There were tons of World War I vets at the reunion. Anyway, I befriended them, and 8 books resulted, and only one guy is left who I knew. He's 106, and but they were the most wonderful people in my life, and every single day I missed them, and I realized that I put all my eggs in their basket, so to speak, and I generally sacrifice friendships with people my own age to be friends with them, and now I don't have their friendships anymore. So
Let me, we're about the hour mark, so I wanted to do 2 things. Number 1, I want you guys to throw your trivia question out there. And number 2, closing out with what's left? What's next? I know we talked briefly about it, but both Joe and Chris, I'm curious to hear where you think the series is going to go over the next 12 to 24 months.
Well, the next 1 to 2 years is easy. Stonewall, the Valley games are going to come out. It should go out and pre-order sometime in the next few months, and hopefully get printed and shipped this year. That's up to production schedules, of course. And then we already have a good leg up on the next game after that, the Kentucky 1862 campaign, because we're nearly done with the maps because Charlie's already producing them. And now we've got another project, the starter kit game.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And there'll be a skirmisher in there in the books, because we have a really good player who we've worked with in the past who did a module, which is a campaign, Lee's Last Offensive for one of the last skirmisher, Niall Taylor in Scotland. And he's working on a completely redone Fredericksburg campaign, not revised, but just completely redone from scratch. So that would come out in a skirmisher.
Cool.
The next
It
skirmisher.
sounds like a decent amount of stuff to keep you guys busy.
All right. Trivia question, boys. Give us something good.
Well, Chris has one and I have one. And
Awesome.
mine, I
Excellent.
think,
We
is
like
harder
that.
than Chris's. So maybe let's start with the easy one. Chris, you go. It's not easy, but go ahead.
Part of it's easy. What was the first Great Campaigns game? What was the title of it? What was the name of the first scenario in it? And what year was the game published? That's the hard part of the question. The name of the first game, the name of the first scenario in it, and then what year was it published? And a bonus part, who was the publisher?
Okay.
And
Well, that's a
my
good
trivia-
question because
I'm sorry.
I think folks have a chance of researching and figuring that out, even if they're not GCACW. That's a really good
Right,
question.
right. Yep.
However, I'm anxious to hear what the more complicated one is.
Yeah, it's a toughie.
Is this going to be if a unit moves 6 hexes from Franklin to Joe's
that
Fort
bad.
next to the woods?
No, in GCACW, there's a very short list of actions you can take as a player, maybe only 6 actions. And one of the key actions is assault, which is essentially replicates a core, making assault on the enemy lines. So I would like the trivia question to be name one Union leader and one Confederate leader who are able to make assault actions with both infantry and cavalry at the same time. There are only 2 of them. One Union and
Okay,
one
don't
Confederate.
don't give the answers. Don't give the answers. But
Okay.
please email me the answers because I'm not going to have a chance of knowing this. But that's a great question too. I like that question.
And
So here's what we're going to do.
what are we going to do? Go ahead.
We're going to go ahead and do both trivia questions. A chance for 2 prizes because people like prizes. I'm like Oprah. I like to give stuff away. We'll give away the Valley game for Joe's question because it's newer, but it's harder. And we'll give away the Kentucky game because it's got the sexy title for Chris's question, which might appeal to a lot more people. Email us at podcasts@mmpgames.com, gamers.com. I swear I'm going to put it on my screen. I promise. Podcasts@mmpgamers.com. Garrett will throw the illustration up anyways.
Chris Withers, Joe Balkowski, thank you. I promise you. So we're over north of 1,000 viewers, weekly subscribers, and this is going to garner us more because we'll spread the word, social media and all that. You'll get links to spread it around. But we're growing and we're having fun. And like I said, we've had a very significant demand for GCACW content. And so this is going to scratch that itch. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it enough that we could have you back.
All right.
Sure.
Anytime. Let me know.
Is there
Guys, take care.
anything else you guys want to let us know about, just in case? I know Curt's itching to keep these around an hour.
Hey,
but
when I stop this, just let me before you sign off. Let me make sure everything's okay when I stop it. So, anything you
stopping
guys
it,
got
or
any
are we
last words?
asking-
Anything you want to leave with, or are we good?
I'm good.
All right.
All right, guys, thank you very much.